What's going on, Sports Nation? I'm your host, Kenneth Tiberius Clark, and you guys are listening to another fun or interesting episode of the Sports Exclusive podcast. So the topic for today is going to be a very sensitive topic, right? A very divisive topic, right? The country split on this. Transgenders in competitive sports, right? This has, once again, been a very, very touchy subject, I would say, over the past 25 to 30 years, but goes back even further. But it's mainly in part because you've seen so many cases where there has been an athletic or competitive disadvantage, right? Specifically on the trans female side. And that is, born a male, grow up, transition to a female. But this has been obviously competing in women's sports. So, we have a lot of different examples. Tiffany Abreu, Veronica Ivy, CeCe Telfair, etc. The list goes on. It's actually a pretty hefty list of transgender athletes that have dominated sports outside of their gender. And we'll mention a few of them later. But these situations have it's caused an uproar. So much that we saw the House of Republicans, they passed a ban recently, earlier this year, that prevents biological male athletes from competing in sports designated for female. This is at the high school level. And if I'm not mistaken, these are all federally funded schools. So naturally, there's been, some pushback from the LGBTQ community. They probably felt like, man, we're breaking barriers. We found a lane where we can dominate in, and, for us to just take that away from them, or for it to slip from their grasp, I'm sure it feels like it's upsetting. It feels like a setback for them, right? They feel like they've fought so hard to even be able to compete in those sports. But on the other end, I think you have people that you have people that applaud this ban. They don't want, and this is just the very blunt, transparent part. They don't want their young children or adolescent children making contact with a transgender of the opposite biological sex in the locker room. I think that creates some confusion. And then you also have some confusion that comes along with just blurring the gender lines in competitive sports, period, right? Like right now, people are running around like chicken with their head cut off. They don't know what to do. So for the most part, I can see where both sides, where their frustration lies, right? The LGBTQ community, they feel like something's been taken away from them, and they feel like, they're not being appreciated or are not given a chance to be included. And, we have the other side, which is probably the masses, where they're like, well, this isn't fair. This biological man shouldn't be competing against this, this girl. So that is, kind of how things are right now. But for this particular episode, I really just wanted to explore both sides, both arguments, so that we can kind of get a better understanding of where everyone's coming from and hopefully achieve somewhat of a peaceful solution somewhere down the line. And I do my best to remain, objective, because my personal beliefs or opinions don't have to align with anybody else's. They don't have to, just like your opinions don't have to align with mine. I'm just here to create a positive conversation for us to carry out on. That's what I do as a podcaster and as a sports junkie and a sports media guy. I'm here to create a positive conversation. But before we kind of talk about the history of trans athletes, I'm gonna do a quick pronoun check, right? I don't want y'all to show up to my house with pitchforks and torches, right? I seen how y'all did my boy Malik Yoba when he was on a podcast or a radio show, man. They were bullying that guy. So I just wanted to do a pronoun check. So trans female is or trans woman, what is defined as someone who is registered as a male at birth, but lives and identifies as a woman. And then the opposite, trans male, is of course the opposite of a registered female that lives and identifies as a male, right? These are the meanings when you hear me use these pronouns. Now, quick look at the history. And I learned a little bit in this process of just prepping for this episode. the first, I guess, most popular transgender athlete, I want to say the first to compete at the pro level, was Renee Richards. Renee Richards was a tennis player in the 70s. And basically made a decision in 1975. This is already a grown man. Makes a decision to transition in 1975. Was already playing professional tennis. Tries to apply to the U.S. Open in 1976. And the United States Tennis Association forces her to take the bar body test. I guess it's like the chromosome test, like to determine gender, right? So they said, okay, here, we'll take this. If you pass this, knowing damn well that she wasn't going to pass it. If you pass this, we'll let you compete. So she refused. And then ultimately she got banned from the 1976 U.S. Open, at least competing on the women's side. So she turns around and she sues the United States Tennis Association on grounds that she has the right to be a female. And she wins. And ultimately, she played in the 1977 U.S. Open, where I think she made the finals in doubles, right? Ultimately lost, but she made her first time she made the finals in doubles. And that's just one example, and that's on the trans female side. When looking at trans males, this one's a little bit more, we don't hear about this enough, or we probably don't hear about it that much. It's probably not that common. But we have more modern examples like Chris Mosier. I hope I said the name right. And Bobby Hirsch, right? And Chris Mosier is a 6-time USA triathlete, right? 2-time national champion in race walking. But Chris Mosier was the first transgender athlete to get sponsored by Nike, right? Few people know this. And he was the first transgender male to represent the United States in open competition, right? So he broke some barriers. And then currently we have Bobby Hirsch, who's young, right? This is literally going on right now. And Bobby Hirsch is one of the few NCAA athletes in history to compete in both men and women's sport at the collegiate level. So I think the number's under 50. It's not that many, right? I want to say anywhere, but probably like 30, 36, something like that. But he's currently at Wayne State. So I guess Bobby Hirsch always was gender fluid and things of that nature, but plays his freshman year for the women's team, was recruited and got a full scholarship at Wayne State for the women's fencing team. And going into his sophomore year, makes the full transition and says, hey, I need to play with the men. And they find a way to make it happen. And as a sophomore, now he's going into his junior year, he plays for the men's fencing team at Wayne State. So, yeah, I mean, and, he held his own. He made I would say at least a successful transition, right? Struggled, right? Doesn't win a lot, but he is competing with the males after formerly competing with the females. So there are many examples of trans females and trans males that have kind of overcome adversity to compete and just set the mark in their respective sports, right? With the latter overcoming a huge athletic disadvantage. And I don't say that lightly. So when we talk about, disadvantages, and I think that's the main issue for the other end of the house. The masses, the people that don't agree with transgenders competing in regular competitive sports. Of course, right, almost all of the examples when we look at the disadvantage, it's on the trans female side. So, the trending topic has been Leah Thomas, right? About a year ago, 2022, Leah Thomas, swimmer for Penn State, right? And here's the thing, quick history on Leah Thomas. I think it was formerly Liam. He wasn't a bad swimmer, right? Like Leah Thomas, like when she competed with the male, she's a pretty solid swimmer. Now, granted, she lost some when she started going through the transition. She lost some muscle, things of that nature. But for the most part, Leah Thomas was pretty solid for a swimmer, and swimming is very competitive. So while competing as a male, her sophomore year, right, she got the highest recorded top times for Penn State's men's team in the 500 free, the 1,000 free, the 1650 free, And once again, this was as a sophomore. And then that same year, she ranked nationally 554th in the 200 freestyle, 65th in the 500 freestyle, and 32nd in the 1650 freestyle. Now, people look at that and be like, all right, Ken, like, come on, it's not that impressive. Like, you rank 554th, 65th, 30 seconds are, but it's still not, you don't think it's that high. Well, guess what? If you transition those times and those rankings to the female side, she would rank first in the 200 freestyle, fifth in the 500 freestyle, and eighth in the 1650 freestyle. That's drastic. That's crazy, right? That's a crazy, that's a big difference. So I can see how people could be frustrated about that. But we fast forward to 2022 and Leah Thomas wins. It becomes a national championship in the 500 freestyle. And she beat out the girl is Emma Wyant, right? A silver medalist in the Olympics, right? So meaning Emma Wyant is one of the best swimmers in the world. She's one of the best female swimmers in the freaking world. And she lost, right, to Leah Thomas. So that just shows you the separation that there is, that a male that transitions to female, even if he's not just an above average or good, can beat the top female swimmer or one of the top female swimmers in the world, right? That's how crazy it is. So, and then here's another name. This was actually, people remember this about 10, 15 years ago. You had Fallon Fox. Fallon Fox was a trans female MMA fighter. Scary, right? He was making headlines. This was about 2014, 2015. I was in the Navy at the time. But she fought this girl named Tamika Brents. And it could be exaggerated, but I know she beat her pretty bad. She beat her by TKO, but they say that she fractured the girl's skull. Now, whether that's up for debate, whether it happened, whether it didn't happen, one thing, I always look at what Tamika said after the fight, which I thought was just, was a very interesting quote. She said that she had never felt so overpowered in the octagon, in the ring. She said she's fought a lot of good fighters, but she's never felt that type of raw power, right? I'm paraphrasing. That to me, not only is interesting, but it's very evident of the physical difference between a biological male and a biological female, right? It's something that unfortunately, we want to overlook it because we want to give people a chance to be included and to compete, but we just unfortunately cannot overlook that. So, people kind of forget, both these examples that I used, kind of like how I said about Renee Richards earlier, they were full grown testosterone filled men by the time that they decide to transition. Fallon Fox has a child. Fallon Fox is technically a father, right? This is just the reality of the situation. So I'm sure that kind of played a huge part in athleticism, bone density, muscle, right? So I think that that's a very honest concern, especially for parents that are looking at what the sports, the dynamic of what sports is for young kids right now. That's an honest concern for parents. They want to give their kids the best opportunity to compete and to be successful. They don't want to put them in an unfair situation. So, and I spoke earlier about trans males competing in men's sports. And I gave the examples, Chris Mosher and Bobby Hirsch. You guys, they might be outliers. They very well may be outliers. You just don't see that many examples of trans males competing in male sports. And I think it's because a lot of them know that it can be daunting. It's daunting. And, even me, I'm a male that's played male sports. I have ran up against some physical freaks, some people that had no business doing some of the things that they were doing. So that is just the reality of it. And I'll give you two great examples. All right. We look at Venus and Serena. This one's popular. When Venus and Serena played, that guy, they lost to a man. He was a professional tennis player, obviously, but he beat them back to back. And I think he beat them like 6-1 and 5-2. He beat the brakes off of them. And these are two of the greatest female athletes to ever grace this freaking earth, especially Serena. And the guy was ranked like 203rd, 205th in the world. So he wasn't like great. He was like average or below average, and he beat the snot out of them. And then you had the U.S. women's soccer team. This wasn't that long ago, and we know how competitive they've been over the years. We did a soccer episode. Why isn't the U.S. better in the World Cup? And I gave the women their kudos because they really have carried the flag well. You guys, they lost like 5-2 to a soccer team of 15-year-olds, right? This is the height of women's soccer in America, and they've been competitive in worldwide play, and they lost to some 15-year-old boys, right? That's the reality. That's the difference that there can be between males and females, right, in athleticism. So, just considering that, I honestly consider both sides of the argument. There has to be a solution that can be reached ultimately, hopefully. Maybe it's funding leagues. You hear this one a lot, and I know it sounds a little cliche, but I would totally, I'm on board with this one. Maybe funding leagues in sports specifically for trans athletes, regardless of biological gender, right? Because that's something that I think the LGBTQ community wants. They want it to be regardless of what your biological gender is. And once again, I think that would be perfect. Every community, in my opinion, deserves an area to thrive in. Why not the LGBTQ community? How come they can't have their own leagues? Right? Something to think about. Or if you guys are part of that small group that you don't believe, or you're not sold on the physical disadvantage, you remodel current gender sports to create as much gender equality as possible. So maybe you match up, and this is going to sound, don't take this the wrong way, guys. I'm not trying to insult anybody. You take the best trans male athletes and you find a way to match them up with the least biological male athletes, and vice versa for women. You take the absolute best biological female athletes and you match them up against the trans female. I don't know. You try to create as much athletic equality as possible. I don't know. Once again, I'm not trying to be funny. That's just a thought. I don't have the answers. Obviously, none of us do, because if we did, this would be taken care of already. But all that said, I wanted to stay indifferent as much on this topic. Despite having any of my own personal beliefs, I wanted to operate as like a neutral presence that can kind of bring people together and hopefully help us eventually find an answer. So everyone deserves to be included. This is the big thing. Everyone deserves to be included or accepted in some way, shape, form, or fashion. The LGBTQ community as well. Everybody deserves to be included, but it has to be done in a fair, safe, and respectable fashion. Fair, safe, and respectable fashion, right? But those are my thoughts. You guys can tell me what you guys think, Sports Nation. I'll see you guys next time. What's going on, Sports Nation? I'm your host, Kenneth Tiberius Clark. And if you guys are here listening or watching, you just completed season 1 of the Sports Exclusive podcast. It's been a wild ride over the past 8 to 10 months. We started back in October 2022. We started our rebrand, relaunch process. I met with production and we came up with a plan. And after, editing and further planning, we were able to get season 1 out, released and available to you guys by January 29th. And we've been going every Wednesday since, got 2 more Wednesdays at this point where I'm recording, we have 1 to 2 more Wednesdays left. But since then, it's been nothing but positive feedback and constant ideas brewing, not only coming from myself, from production, and even from you guys, the fans. I have people message me all the time and tell me, hey, let's talk about this. You should touch a little bit more on this topic. So it's just been a lot of great ideas brewing. And I like to think that overall, looking back on season 1, I think we've accomplished our mission of really just producing a diverse sports experience. Like I told you, we see all these shows that kind of follow the status quo, focus on our regular basketball, baseball, football. We wanted to push the envelope a little bit. And we really wanted to take a focus on all areas and all sports. And I think that we have done that so far. So let's see, we tackled some controversial topics, right? False allegations against athletes, The conduct double standard against female athletes, right? That one was good. We discussed our less popular sports like water polo, para track and field. And we jumped back into the Break Room Breakdown vault and revisited some of those great moments, some of those great interviews. But, that being said, I would like to say I appreciate everyone that has supported the show up until this point. It's just continuously growing. And you guys are a big part of that. We value your input. We value your opinion. We value your contribution. So I thank you guys for that. But the good news is we're not done, right? We got a, long way to go, a lot more topics to talk about, a lot more things to touch on. Preparation is already underway for season 2, right? I have a lot of stuff going on. I'm up to my eyeballs and just content that I'm planning, but it should be available to you guys anywhere between October to early November. And just hold on. We're going to do some more controversial topics, more to follow on that. We are going to jump into the world of expressive dance sport, right? Because dancing is a sport too, and there are a whole lot of them. So we'll be talking about that. We're going to go back in time to talk about the baseball Negro Leagues, something that's just starting to get its shine. I know you had a lot of great players come out of that time frame, and they're really starting to get the attention that they deserve. So we'll talk on that. And we will definitely talk a little bit more about sports journalism and sports media, because that's what's inspired me to do what it is that I do. And many guys, many podcasters and sports broadcasters and things of that nature. So we have a lot of great content planned for you guys. We'll be busy over the next 2 to 3 months, and in the meantime, hey, I encourage you guys to go back, watch or listen, depending on what community you're in, podcasting or YouTube, to the season 1 episodes that you just haven't got a chance to check out. And then once again, let us know any ideas or tips you have that could help make us better for season 2. Sports you want to see, controversial topics you feel like you would like us to discuss. Hey, just shoot us an inbox, Sports Exclusive Podcast on IG, or me directly, Tiberius519, and I will definitely take any ideas or any tips there as well. But we just want to make season 2 even better. And but yeah, that's it. That's really all I got, Sports Nation. Have fun with the show. Like I said, just go ahead and rummage through the whole season 1 and tell me what you guys think. Enjoy the beginning of football and basketball season. And, because it's going to be fun. Football, we about to jump into training camp. So, this thing is still, once preseason starts, it's over, right? And then basketball will be back in October as we know it. So have fun with that. And before you guys know it, the Sports Exclusive Podcast will be back with you guys. So it's been a fun season 1, wild ride, and I'll see you guys soon.